Good luck in Atlanta. Good luck. It's the exile here. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. This is our weekly exploration of the Torah portion. This week's parsha is Vayeira. Vayeira. So it picks up the narrative from the end of last week's Torah portion, where Abraham, has just undergone, if that's the right way to say it, a surgery. Outpatient, inpatient, whatever, outpatient. He underwent a Brit Milah, circumcision, at the ripe old age of 99. And the Torah portion picks up on the third day after the circumcision, when, according to our tradition, the pain was at the greatest. And who shows up at his tent? Because he had a tent. 3 angels. How's it going? Now they look like men. He thinks they're men. He feeds them. They turn out to be angels. Now we know the real story, and the real story is that they are here for a mission. Number one, tell me, what did they do? What did the angels do? Who knows?
They told about Sarah.
Excellent. One of them notified about Isaac's birth. Sarah would have a baby. What else? One to overturn the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Good. And healing Abraham, healing Avram. It's 3 days. So one of the angels brought healing, which reminds me that tonight's class is dedicated to the refuah shlema, to the good health, and to the healing of our class members, so Joy, as well as Ray's sister, Lillian, who needs a refuah shlema as well, and neighbors that need a refuah shlema, and anyone who needs a healing should have the healing in honor of Dina Malka. Everyone should be well. Okay, so those are the 3 angels. And the reason why we're going to get into this story is, well, first of all, it's this week's Torah portion, but here I want to digress for a moment. And let's talk about places or spaces. So many people have set places for things, right? Many people, when they come to some sort of whatever it is, gathering, they like to have a set place. So let's go around the table and have a quick discussion. In what context do people have set places, set seats?
Well, Steve and I always sit here.
Right, so by a class, let's say. Where else do we have a set seat?
You have comfort in a class, a certain seat there, but in my house I have, and I feel guilty about it sometimes, so I can talk to you about it. I study in a recliner.
Nice.
With a big TV table with a big one, both on it. But I feel guilty because it's a recliner.
Oh.
But to sit in like a dining room chair for even 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's too difficult.
It's
So I read.
So you're saying you feel guilty because like the feet are up and you're studying Torah? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you need to feel so guilty about it. But so you have a set place in the house. That's good. Okay, good.
A floor lamp right next to the chair.
Good. I'm gonna say that's okay.
I have a writing desk that's not in my office space, but since Dan bought me this great leather chair,
Nice.
I spend most of my time doing everything in that chair.
That's great.
But he likes to sit at the dining room table to do everything.
Nice.
You asked about reservation, where you need a reservation?
No, more of like where we feel comfortable in set seats.
Well, like synagogue sometimes.
Oh.
My favorite.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So in synagogue and shul, so oftentimes people have set seats, even if it's not officially like a seat that's sold, but unofficially, officially, or officially, unofficially, people like to have their, we call it makom kavua, set seat. And the question is there any holiness behind having a set place in the synagogue, or is it just something that's comfortable? You know, people have a set place around the table, if around the family meal, so certain people usually sit in a certain spot. Kids have their desk in class where they sit. So the question is, what's the deal with synagogue seating?
I would argue that if you genuinely come to shul to pray, that that set place helps you to get into the mindset. It's a holy place.
Good. I like that. So today we're going to explore places, set seats. And the context will be this week's Torah portion. And again, let's get back to it. So the three angels come to Avram, Abraham, and they bring the news of a child. They bring healing to him, and two of them are overturning, or some of them are overturning Sodom. Now, take a look at this inside. Let's open up the Chumash, please, to the relevant texts. So Torah portion Vayeira begins on page 94 and 95. But let's pick it up. Adina Malka, I'll ask you to pick it up on page number 101.
Give me a second.
This is straight up Torah 101.
Okay.
All right.
101. You mean start reading where it says God spoke to Moshe?
No, I don't think that's 101.
Angels.
Oh, that's 1101.
1101.
Oh.
You're 1,000 pages ahead of us.
I'm a speed reader.
Adina Malka, you are ahead of your time. Standard 101, where it says Avram pleads for Sodom and Amorah.
Let's see, am I still in
It says the angels got up.
Oh, the angels got up from there and gazed despairingly upon Sodom. Abraham went with them to escort them.
So this is after they've eaten by him, or they pretended to eat, whatever it is, he hosted them. They get up and they look at Sodom, at the city that will be destroyed. And Avram goes to escort them. Okay, continue, please. This is a great...
God said, how could I conceal from Abraham what I am doing to Sodom in the very land I promised to give him? Since Abraham was mentioned by God, he blessed him. Abraham will become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the world will be blessed through him. For I have known and cherished him, because he instructs his sons and his household after him to keep the way of God, acting with charity and justice. He instructs them to do so in order that God will bring upon Abraham everything he had said he would do for him.
Keep on going, please.
Keeping his word, God said to Abraham, since the outcry of Sodom and Amorah has become great, and since their sin has become very grave, I will descend now and see if they have actually caused the outcry which has reached me. Then there will be destruction. If not, I will know how to punish them. The angels turned from there where Abraham had escorted them to and went to Sodom. God was still present before Abraham. Abraham approached God and said, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous men in the midst of the city. Will you still destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? To do such a thing as this, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, equating the innocent and the guilty, would desecrate people's perception of you in this world, and it would desecrate you in the next world. Would the judge of the entire earth not perform true justice? God said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous men within the city, I will forgive the entire region of 5 cities for their sake.
Okay, so basically at this point, Avram learns about the impending doom and destruction. And by the way, last week's class was all about why they deserved or why they earned that type of punishment. And we said because they were not nice and not kind to each other, and that destroys a nation or civilization from within. Okay, so here it's coming down, and one thing that we see about Avram is that he's davening, he's praying on behalf of these cities, and he says he's negotiating, he's putting on his lawyer or his legal hat, and he's basically saying, if there are 50 righteous people, spare the cities. And then Hashem says, okay, but there aren't 50, and so he then goes down to 45. Nope.
45.
Do I hear 40? Nope. Do I hear 30? Nope. Do I hear 20? No. Do I hear 10? No. And finally, Avram goes back to his place. So take a look. the last line on that same page, 103, verse 33. Dina Malka, please read that. When he had finished speaking to Avram. Do you see that?
When he had finished speaking to Abraham, God the judge departed. Abraham the advocate returned home, but the prosecution remained.
So basically that's how that dialogue is concluded, that Avram finishes speaking with God. God goes on his way, if you will, and Abraham goes on his way. He goes back home. Okay, the next page. I just want to paint this picture, this narrative for you, or with you.
Mm-hmm.
Page 105. Now the angels come to destroy Lot. So meanwhile, while this negotiation is happening, the angels are making their way to Sodom. They come to Sodom, and they tell Lot, Abraham's nephew, about what's happening. And their job is to rescue him and make sure that he's not getting caught up in all of the devastation. Fine, and that's what happens. They rush Lot and his family out. Then his wife turns around, and she turns into a pillar of salt. Right, all of that stuff, the story that we know. Take a look though on page 111. Let's take a look at page 111. So amidst all of this stuff, amidst all of this this narrative about the angels coming to Sodom and rescuing Lot and pulling him out before the destruction happens, suddenly the narrative switches back to Abraham. Adina Malka, finish off this story, please, if you will. Top of 111, verse 27, where it says, Avram got up early in the morning.
Let's see. Abraham got up early in the morning and returned to the place where he had stood before God in prayer.
Just to be clear, this was the next day. So again, the angels visited him. They gave him the news. God tells him about Sodom, and he tries to advocate. Doesn't work. He goes home. The next morning, he gets up early in the morning and goes back to that place where that dialogue had been happening the previous evening about the negotiations of 50 people, 45 people, 40, 30, 20, 10, etc. Continue. He gazed.
He gazed at the site of Sodom and Amorah, and over the entire area of the plain. And he saw that, look, a pillar of smoke from the earth had risen like the smoke from a lime kiln.
And we can stop right there. The commentators have a very simple question. We understand the various pieces of the narrative and why they're necessary. So the angels come to Abraham, to Avram and Sarah, and they give good word, and they heal Avram. Then they head on their way to Sodom. God tells Avram, because he can't keep it a secret from Avram what's going to happen. Abraham tries to negotiate. The negotiation doesn't work. And the narrative switches to how it all plays out and how Lot is saved. Why then does the Torah, top of 111, verse 27 and verse 28, the chapter 19 of the book of Bereshit, book of Genesis, why does the narrative suddenly switch back to the perspective of Abraham? And what is it telling us? He gets up early in the morning, goes back to the place. He's overlooking the cities or that area. He sees the destruction happening. Why do we need to know that he was an observer to this? What's going on here? Why is it instructive to tell us that Abraham somehow is involved over here? He's not even involved. He's a passive observer. So the commentaries explain. You understand the question? Does the question make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Commentators explain that when it says, verse 27, top of 111, that Abraham got up early in the morning, what it means is he went back and once again prayed to Hashem. This was 11th hour. In other words, this part of the narrative is right before everything comes down. He prays. The next verse says he looks and everything came down. In other words, the last minute, he wakes up early in the morning to offer a prayer. How do I know this? Again, the commentators discuss this, and I want to draw your attention to text 2b. So let's look into the Torah Studies text. So page 56 in your books or your handouts. So text 2b, here is the Sepharno. All right, Steve, please read this, text 2b.
To the place where he had stood refers to the place where he had escorted the angels, for that is where God's hand was upon him. He went back there because, having found no legal means to defend them, he now wished to ask God for mercy on their behalf.
Listen to what's happening. The night before, the evening before, when God tells Abraham, you know what? If it's for them, let's leave it for them.
I don't think I understand. It might be downstairs.
Okay. The night before, the evening before, when God tells originally about Abraham about the plans to destroy Sodom, so Abraham puts on his legal hat. And he says, wait, it's not right if there's righteous people, and then there's no righteous people. So he says, all right. And he goes home. The next morning he gets up and he says to God, he offers another prayer. He says to God, look, based on right and justice, righteousness and justice, or based on pure justice, you're right. Destroy the city. But I'm pleading to you from a place of chesed, from a place of rachamim. Actually, rachamim is the language used here in the Sefarno. Rachamim means compassion or mercy. And so he says, based on mercy and compassion, God, please forgive them and spare them from destruction. And of course, we know the answer was no. Right? The answer was no to that prayer because clearly it was destroyed. And Abraham's prayer is not answered. Now, the commentators asked the question. So again, to answer the question is, why does the Torah switch back to the narrative perspective of Abraham and tells us he got up early in the morning? Who cares and what was he doing? He was offering another round of prayers, not advocating from a legal perspective, but begging from a place of compassion and love. Why did he wait till the next morning? If he wanted to switch gears and ask from a different place.
Well, I don't know. Isn't this where all the different times of prayers gets established from in the Torah? The morning, afternoon, and evening.
There are, I don't know if it's from here. Yashkem Avram Baboker, is that here? Hold on. Is this the place where we Yashkem? It does say that. Oh, good, excellent. So we have a text number 3, which we're not going to read. This is a Hasidic text from Rabbi Chaim of Chernovitz, the Be'er Maim Chaim, and he explains in text number 3 that the nighttime is a time of Gevura, time of justice, time of judgment. And the morning, right, it's dark, it's gloomy. The morning is a time of chesed, the light comes up, it's a time of love. So therefore, at night, in the modality of justice, in the evening, in the modality of justice, din, gevura, he appealed to God's sense of justice. And in the morning, he appealed to God's sense of chesed, so it all lines up. But now again, at least we have an understanding of the construct of the story. So, God tells Abraham advocates, it doesn't work. The next morning he prays for forgiveness, it also doesn't work. Sodom is destroyed. All right, he's bad, he's 0 for 2 on that for that cause. But we're still left with one question. The Talmud points this out on text 4. It says, Abraham, top of 111, got up early in the morning. And then it says, he returned to the place where he had stood before God in prayer. Why does it tell us he returned to the place? Who cares where he was? The main point is that he prayed once again to God. Why does it say that he went back to the place? The Talmud says in text 4, we're going to read it in a moment. David, you're going to read it. The Talmud says in Tractate Brachot, you know what it means? When you pray, go back to where you prayed the previous time. Remember we talked about synagogue places and set places? The Talmud says, why does it tell us that Abraham woke up the next morning to pray? And he went to the same place he prayed or he advocated the night before. You know why? The message is, if you have a place where you prayed, go to the same place once again. Text number 4. This is, again, advocating for set seats.
Rabbi Chalbo said in the name of Rav Huna, one who sets a fixed place for his prayer, the God of Abraham comes to his aid. When he passes away, people say, where is the humble one? Where is the pious one? One who is among the disciples of our father Abraham. From where did we derive that Abraham was our father? That Abraham our father set a fixed place for his prayer? As the verse states, and Abraham arose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before God. The verb stood refers to none other than prayer, as it is stated, and Pinchas stood and prayed.
So again, the Talmud says that the fact that he stood refers to prayer, and again, the point is he stood or he prayed where he had prayed previously. And here we see that following the footsteps if we want to follow the footsteps of Abraham, and who doesn't, then it means that we should have a set place in synagogue where we pray. We should have a set place where we pray, based on this Talmudic statement. This is unequivocal. In other words, the Talmud says clearly, have a set place to pray. Don't just every time show up to a different place. Have a set place where you pray. However, the commentaries have a major debate. Are we talking about in shul or at home? Listen to this. The Talmud just says you should have a set place for prayer. But in which context? So some commentaries, we'll see in a moment, say the following. In synagogue, you don't need a set place for prayer. Wherever you pray, it's a holy place. So you don't need to be in that share versus that share. As long as you're in the building, as long as you're in the sanctuary, it's good. What the Talmud means about having a set place for prayer is when you're praying at home. When you're praying at home, you might get distracted. One day in the kitchen, one day in the dining room, one day in the living room, one day in the, right? You might get distracted because it's not a place of a sanctuary place of prayer. So when you're at home, you should have a designated prayer spot that every time, if you pray at home, you should have that one spot. That's one opinion. Another opinion says no. Even in synagogue, it means have a designated place. So here, let's just look at these two opinions. Text number 5.
The requirement to set a fixed place for prayer does not apply in a synagogue, inasmuch as the entire synagogue is a place of prayer. It doesn't matter if a person sometimes sits in this corner and other times in a different corner. Rather, the point is that one should set a fixed place for prayer in his home, emphasis added. Thus, for those times one is unable to go to the synagogue, he prays at home and has a set place for it.
This is Rabbi Yonah of Gerona. By the way, this is not a small Rishon, early commentary. He was a very prominent Talmudic scholar and halachist, and he says clearly his opinion, and he's in the minority opinion, but his opinion is, very strongly, that when the Talmud says have a fixed place for prayer, we learn it from Abraham, it's not talking about synagogue. Synagogue, you don't need a fixed place. The whole place is fixed for prayer. You're not going to be distracted in synagogues. It doesn't matter where you sit. When do you need to have a fixed place? It's when you're at home, when you're in a distractible place or a distracting place, then have a fixed place so that you can concentrate. You know, this is your prayer place. But not everyone agrees with this. Not everyone agrees. And we have text number 7. We're skipping text 6. Text number 7. Text 6 is the same thing. Magen Avraham agrees with that. Text 7, the Alter Rebbe in his Code of Jewish Law, the founder of Chabad, in his Shulchan Aruch Code of Jewish Law says, nope, even when you're in synagogue, you should have a fixed place. And by the way, it's not just the Alter Rebbe in the 1700s who is coming up with this. It's most of the Rishonim, like the Rambam, Maimonides, the Rush, most halachic codifiers and Talmudic commentaries are understanding the Talmudic passage that we had before that said that was advocating to have a set place, that is referring to synagogues also, not just at home, but also synagogues. And let's see how it's worded here in this Code of Jewish Law. Text 7, Dan.
One should set a fixed place for prayer and should not pray elsewhere except out of great necessity. Anyone who sets a fixed place for prayer, God of Abraham comes to his aid. Indeed, Abraham set a fixed place for prayer. It is not enough to pick a specific synagogue to pray. Rather, within the synagogue one attends regularly. You must have a set place. Any 4-cubit area is considered one place, for one cannot confine his place to an area smaller than that. Furthermore, when one prays at home, you should have a set place so as not to be disturbed by people in the house.
You see that? The Alter Rebbe says all of the above. He says like this. What does it mean to have a set place for prayer? Number 1, have a set synagogue. Number 2, within the synagogue, have a set place. And he says, what defines a place? It should be within the area of about 4 cubits, which is approximately 6 feet. In other words, you should be in the same general vicinity whenever you go to that synagogue. Now, obviously what it means, obviously, and maybe it's not so obvious, but if you have a set place, and then you have somebody that's visiting, and they get to synagogue first, and they sit in your place, you know what? You don't have to be rude and say, hey, that's my place, you got to go out, right? Eviction notice. Pull out the old, remember that hook on stage? It just says like, oh, I'm glad you warmed this up for me. No. So obviously we can be nice, and we can be a mensch, and we can let them sit there, and it's not going to be a disaster. But the point is that we should have set places, and it's not only at home where we might otherwise be disturbed with all the distractions because it's not a synagogue, it's a home. So we should have a set prayer area. Like in my house, I have a stender. You know what a stender is? A stender is a left turn. I have one made out of wood, and I have it in a certain corner. And whenever I pray at home, so that's my place. I have a prayer area. So I know, like that's my corner. So I'm not like, by the table, with the stuff, the other stuff. It's like, it's a designated corner. Stender.
There's a conservative rabbi named Chaim Donen who writes a lot of books on modern Jewish observance, and he doesn't intend to be funny, but he says that if you haven't been to synagogue in a long time, go ahead and go. And he said, of course you know this tradition that people sit in circles.
Right.
And somebody may look at you, but then next time you'll know not to sit in that seat.
Exactly. When they're like, this time it's okay, but next time, then that's funny actually. The evil eye. When they give you this, I had that experience. I was away for Shabbos a little while ago, not that long ago, maybe a month or two ago, and you just don't know where to sit sometimes. You don't want to sit in someone's seat. But look, it's not the end of the world. Everyone will be fine. But in general, the Alter Rebbe says we should have a set synagogue. So certainly Chabad in town, and then so set synagogue, and we should have a set place defined by like a 6 feet area within the synagogue, ideally, and of course a place at home as well. All three. Now,
I had a woman almost sit on me once because I sat in her seat.
That was a joke, but it turns out it's not such a joke. Okay. The question, though, that we're left with. So now we kind of wrapped up the narrative in a way, because the Torah tells us that Abraham prays the next day in the same spot. Why? To tell us to pray in the same spot. Beautiful. We have a nice, very, very nice idea. The question is going to be why? What is the benefit of praying in the same spot? Now, a person might say, well, we're creatures of habit. We feel more comfortable in the same spot. Who wants to sit in the seat over? That's crazy talk. Who does that? Barbarians. So it might be a comfort thing, but is there a spiritual component to sitting in the same spot? It seems like if the Talmud is talking about it, and if the role model here is Abraham, it seems like there must be some sort of deeper Jewish, spiritual, religious, holy rationale behind sitting in the same spot for prayer. So to explain this, we're going to switch from space to time. These are the two definitions of the world, of the created universe, space and time. So we're speaking of the first half of this lesson has been about space, sitting in the same space. Let's not worry about it at this point. Sitting in the same space that you sit in synagogue. Now let's focus on time. So let's talk about the mitzvah of Torah study. Again, we're switching gears from prayer, space, to Torah study in time. So let's talk about this for a moment. Every mitzvah has parameters. So like tefillin. My son Mendel put on tefillin for the first time this morning. 2 months exactly. We have a custom 2 months before the bar mitzvah. He practices, he gets ready for it. Okay. So you put on tefillin. So the mitzvah of tefillin is to put on tefillin once a day. If you put it on in the morning and you said some prayers, you're good. You don't put it on lunch break and then again when you get home from work, you put it on once and you're done. When it comes to matzah, there's a certain amount of matzah that you eat. When it comes to shaking the lulav, you do it once a day in a certain way, and you're done. You've done the mitzvah. Every mitzvah has its parameters. Shofar and Rosh Hashanah. You hear it once, you're done. Now you can blow it for someone else so that they hear it for the first time, but for you to hear, you hear it once and you're done. When it comes to Torah study, there's a mitzvah of studying Torah. What are the parameters? Now, Torah is different. Torah is not like, well, I studied and I know it. Slow down. If you and I study Torah, like for the rest of our lives, non-stop, we still wouldn't get through everything. Torah and its subsidiaries and the whole body of Torah, I don't mean just the 5 books, obviously. I mean like the whole body of Jewish scholarship is so vast and so immense, we can't get through it. So when there's a mitzvah, one of the 613 commandments is study Torah. How much? When do I stop? It's like, put on tefillin, I did it, it's done. But with Torah, it can go on forever, so what's my obligation? So, halacha, Jewish law discusses it. Let's take a look at what it says. Text number 8. This is again from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad. And look what he says. He says, every Jewish man is obligated to study Torah, whether poor or wealthy, healthy or ailing. Even a pauper collecting alms, and even a husband and father, in others implying other obligations, is obligated to set a fixed time for Torah study by day and by night. As the verse states, you shall meditate therein day and night. By the way, the reason that he emphasizes every Jewish man is because women are not obligated to the same extent in Torah study. When I say that, it's because of pragmatic considerations of time and availability, but women are certainly obligated to study the areas of Judaism that they need to know, which is pretty much every area. So it may be a slightly different obligation, but generally speaking, it's the same obligation. So what do we see here? There's a mitzvah to study Torah, but as it's defined in the Code of Jewish Law, it's day and night, and the way we understand it is a little bit by day and a little bit by night. In other words, if you're working and you can't study all your waking hours because it's not practical, because how does anything else get done? So you study a little bit in the morning or in the daytime and a little bit at night. And that is how you fulfill your obligation. Great. And how much is a little bit? It doesn't say. In fact, some sources it says Perek Echad Shachrit Perek Echad Arvit. One chapter in the morning and one chapter in the evening. It doesn't have to be so long, but just something consistent. But there's something else here. There's something else at play. And that is that in addition to studying Torah every day, and studying a little bit by day and a little bit by night, in addition to this, there is value in setting a specific time to study. In other words, not just study each day, but study each day at whatever it is you set it, but it should be at a set time. Remember, we were speaking about sitting in a set place in synagogue. Now we're talking about that space. In time, when it comes to Torah study, we're meant to set a marker or a space in time in which we study. Let's see this in text number 9. Adina Malka, please read text 9, page 62. Here we have the Kaf HaChaim. Text number 9, yeah.
Okay. The Rema wrote that one should set a specific time for Torah study. One should not learn at one time today and at a different time tomorrow.
In other words, if your morning study is at 9 a.m., then that's what it should be. Every day 9 a.m. It shouldn't be today at 9, tomorrow at 10, the next day at 8. No, it should be, we should set time. We should set a time in our schedules, on our calendar, where from this time to this time, and it doesn't have to be a long time, it could be 5 minutes, but every day it should be a set time, a designated time, and that's it. We block it off. You see, it's not just to study each day and to study daytime and nighttime, but it's to set a time. Now, the question is, what's the value in setting a time? Like we asked, what's the value in setting a seat in the synagogue? In this case, let's ask the question, what is the value in setting a set time to study Torah? Now, the simple answer could be that we're meant to be organized people. We're meant to be people that live on a schedule, and if you live on a schedule, then you should set what time you're going to study Torah. What, it should be willy-nilly up to your whim of the day? No, there should be a set time because we're meant to live with a schedule. Text number 10 talks about, we're not going to read it inside, the Hasidic tradition is always about being organized and being time management and all that stuff. Wonderful. And that's true. But there's something much deeper at play. There's something much deeper at play. And that is that setting a time in each day to study Torah, setting a time, a daily time to study Torah, is not about fixing Torah study in time or setting a time. It's about setting it in our soul. The language in the Hebrew is, there's a kaviat itim, which means setting time, but then there's also the kaviyah, setting benefesh, in one's soul. And I'm going to explain what this means in a moment, but let's read this inside. Text number 11. This text number 11 is a story written by the previous Rabbi about, again, the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was involved in some controversy, as many of us know. Not everyone that lived in his times was on board with this whole Hasidic movement, with the Chabad movement. There were many people that were opposing the Hasidic movement in general and Chabad in particular. And one time, the Alter Rebbe got into a bit of a debate with one of the prominent non-Hasidic leaders of the Shklov Jewish community, and his name was Rabbi Yeshua Zeitlin, and they had a formal debate, and amongst the conversation, this is what the Alter Rebbe said. Steve, please read text 11, very informative.
I have already demonstrated amply the benefits of the Hasidic method, and I will further demonstrate it in a specific regard in terms of setting times for Torah study. The difference between the Hasidic approach and the non-Hasidic approach is this. In the non-Hasidic approach, fixing Torah study pertains to the time of study, whereas in the Hasidic approach, the act of fixing must be not only in time, but also in the soul.
See what it says? When you set a time, it's not just a time in time, it's a time in your soul, or it's setting something in your soul. But again, we haven't explained it. We're just saying it. But what does it mean?
Is Kaviyah related to Kavanah?
No, Kaviyah is it's with a kuf, this one. It's like keva. It means like set or permanent. You know what? Read text 12. Here we go. This is the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, and he explains a little bit more. Take a look at this.
The sage's instruction to make Torah study a priority and work auxiliary means only one study ought to be fixed in the soul. This means a person's ultimate goal should be the study of Torah. Even business dealings should be for the purpose of earning enough to be able to study Torah and raise one's children in the ways of Torah study and mitzvah observance, etc.
Let me explain what he's saying because it's so beautiful. Take a look at this. What are the things that are set on your schedule? And what does it mean when something's set on your schedule? You know what it means? It means if somebody says, hey, can we get on a conference call? Let's say you set your time at 10:15 a.m. You're getting some work in, whatever, but you're setting 10:15 to 10:30 every day, 10:15 to 10:30, that's your time to study Torah. It's on your calendar. It's like you block it off. What does it mean that you block it off? It means that when somebody says, there's a deal, there's a business thing, there's a conference call, whatever it is, you tell them, what do you tell them? But not between 10:15 and 10:30. And you know what that means? That means this becomes a center point in your day. This is something that everything else revolves around. This doesn't move for other things. You see, the stuff that stays fixed and the stuff that moves is very indicative. The stuff that moves around means it's not such a priority. It's open to moving around. The stuff that's fixed means that this is absolutely the real deal. This is what I'm about. This is not up for negotiation. And so the Hasidic approach to setting a time is not just to be organized. To be organized, you should set a time so that you don't forget. It's not about that. Setting a fixed time for Torah study means you set it in your soul, which means that I am about this Torah study. The other work that I do around it, that's all, in the translation here, auxiliary, which means secondary, really secondary. It's tafel, it's secondary to the ikr, to the primary. The primary is that which is fixed on my calendar in my soul, and it's not moving for anything. The president calls. The head of the, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's not a political thing, right? It's the vice president, whoever it is, right? It doesn't matter who calls. I don't know, the go-to thing has always been the president. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
The Pope calls.
The Pope calls, right? You say, who knows, right? The point is, somebody very prominent calls, it doesn't matter. 10:15 to 10:30, I'm not available. Why? Because this is a priority. It's a kaviyah, it's set in my nefesh, in my soul. It's not just set in time. Set in time really means that it's set in my soul. The truth is, one leads to the other. If you really are committed to that time, it means that you're really taking it seriously, and it's really set in your soul. So one does lead to the other. In other words, we're setting time, a specific time to study Torah, because that means that we're committing to something, and not just committing to it, but it's now a priority and my priority. 13a and 13b, I'm going to paraphrase. So beautiful. The previous Rebbe, in the last discourse that he edited before his passing in 1950. It actually was handed out, it was published and sitting in the synagogues that Shabbat morning when he passed away, Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat. The Rebbe, his son-in-law, our Rebbe, was very involved in publication, and it was prepared, 20 chapters. For the next subsequent years, the Rebbe would analyze one of these chapters each day on his father-in-law's yahrzeit. Anyway, in this discourse, known as Basid Lagani, 5710, which is 1950, the previous Rebbe speaks about how in America, or maybe not even America, in the Western world, people have things that they do that they take very seriously for no reason. Like the time to eat. Lunch, 12 o'clock. Why? Why is that a set thing? You're like, no, that's my lunch break. So he's kind of saying how a person is irrationally setting a time that everything else should revolve around the eating time. That's 13a. And 13b, he's saying it really should be the opposite. Let the eating time move around, but let the really important stuff, let that be fixed in our soul. Let that be the irrational thing that never gets moved, no matter how important something else is. My Torah study does not get moved 10:15 to 10:30 in the morning, or whenever it is. I mean, that's not, whatever your time is, you set that time, and irrationally, you don't listen to anything else. It doesn't matter, whatever, this is my time. That's what it means. Keva, kevia, benefesh. That means it's set in the soul. It's fixed in the soul and fixed in the heart.
So I have a
Yeah.
question. Is that why my Chabad.org message comes in every day at the same time?
That might be an automatic programming thing. However, there's something valuable in that. Yes, I would say that fits very much with this theme. The idea is that every day we have that time. And again, it's not just a pragmatic thing. If you said it, you won't forget it. It's not about just pragmatics. It's a statement. The statement is, this is important. This is what's the core of my day, even if it's not quantitatively the biggest, the longest activity I do each day. But when it's said, it means that it's my priority. It's anchored. It's anchored in my soul. It's anchored in my calendar. It's not going anywhere. It's an anchor moment of my day. You know, the ship is certainly larger than the anchor, but the anchor is strong, and the anchor can hold the ship. So it doesn't matter that our day is comprised of all sorts of other activities. The anchor needs to be strong, and it needs to be set. Now, along these lines, we now have an answer, a deeper answer, why it is that we're meant to have a set place in the synagogue to sit. Why is it that we're meant to sit in the same place each time? You know why? Because having a set place, again, we're moving away from Torah study at a set time and moving back to prayer in a set place in the synagogue. Because having a set place means that this is important, and this is anchored, and this is real, and this is meaningful, and I'm taking it seriously. Take a look at the Maharal of Prague, the wonderful, the great mystic and scholar, the creator of the Golem, the Maharal of Prague, text 15, page 69. Look what he says. David, you read last, right? Anne, I think we're up to you. Yeah, Anne, I think we're up to you.
Anything that has a fixed place is very strong. For example, a tree with its roots planted in a single place cannot be moved from its place, even by all the winds in the world. Likewise, a person who fixes a set place for prayer is planted and bound completely to God. God is then his strength and his rock, in whom he can take shelter.
So he gives a beautiful example, a tree that's set in the ground, and the wind can't blow it over. Again, all the winds in the world, all right, but maybe, hurricane. Okay, notwithstanding that. The point is that having a fixed place means that there's something that's anchored. It's an anchor point, which means that we're not meant to just go to synagogue and float around because, we're here, we're floating around. We're meant to have a place. What does it mean to have a place? Prayer is important. Prayer is a priority. Prayer is a commitment. And therefore, if I come to shul and I have a set place, what it means is I'm taking it seriously inside myself. It's also about the physical place, but the physical place reveals that it's important to me, it's a priority to me that I pray, and that I pray in a way that I can wrap my head around it. In other words, in a way that's comfortable, in a way that's permanent in a sense. So what we see here is a beautiful beautiful idea about time and space. How both in time and space we're meant to fix things of value. In time, we're meant to fix Torah study, anchor Torah study in a certain time, every single day, so that Torah study becomes an absolute focal point of our day. No matter how long or short that time is, it becomes the anchor around which everything else revolves. So if I have a meeting, I do it either before or I have it afterwards, but this is unbreachable. This is unbreakable. It's an anchor point. And the same thing is true, that's with time. The same thing is true with space. Our time has to be elevated and made holy by the anchor, and our spaces have to be made holy by anchors. And what is the anchor in space? It means we have a place in the world where we pray. And by the way, we have a place, according to the Alter Rebbe, in shul, in the synagogue, and a place at home. But the point is, in this world in which there's so many moving parts, and we're moving constantly through it, there should be anchor points in space, like time, in space where we go there to pray. And that means that this is connected in a deep way with me. Final point. Final idea. Does this make sense? Yes? Okay. Final idea. To advance it to the next level when it comes to the home. Because, practically speaking, we don't always make it out to synagogue for each prayer. So it's important to have a place, like we said before, a place at home. The Rebbe connects it, this concept of having a set place at home, with the notion of building God a temple. You see, we'll paraphrase text 16a and 16b. The Torah says in the book of Exodus, the Torah tells us about God's command to build the sanctuary, to build a temple. Originally it was the portable sanctuary, the Mishkan, and then eventually the one built of stone in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash. But the point is, God says, "V'asud li mikdash, v'shachanti betocham," build me a sanctuary and I will dwell there. And famously the commentaries say, what does it mean, I will dwell within them? It means every single person. God wants every person to be a temple, to be a sanctuary. And the Rebbe says, how do you and I become a temple for God? Well, it means in our hearts, but it also means in our homes. That our homes are meant to be a mini Beit HaMikdash, a mini temple for God. But how do our homes become that? Our homes have all sorts of places. Bathrooms and dens and garages and kitchens. Where is the Mishkan or the Mikdash? Where is the temple within our homes? Here we go, text 17a. Dan, please read text 17a, page 71. Here's what the Rebbe says.
The obligation to build a sanctuary can be fulfilled by every Jew, namely through fixing a set place for Torah study and prayer, etc. Every Jew who designates a certain room or place for religious practice, in a sense, fulfills the concept of making a sanctuary.
I love that. Look what the Rebbe says. If you take a corner of your living room or dining room, and you say, this area, this chair is whenever I pray or study Torah, right? This is going to be my place to do it. You know what it does, the Rebbe says? It makes that part of your home into God's temple. Just like the temple was a designated place to worship God, right? Jerusalem, Temple Mount, there was a designated space in the world to worship God. And just like a synagogue is a dedicated space, the Rebbe says, take part of your home and make it a designated space. And it's not just that by doing so we are anchored to the experience, but we anchor the divine into a piece of our home. And that's a pretty special thing. Imagine the resale value on that. Hey, imagine putting that on the list of features of our home. This is not only a great, southern, architecture. Bungalow style, craftsman, something, blah, blah, blah. But it's also God's temple. It's kind of a cool thing. I'm not convinced that you'll get extra bucks for it, but it's worth a shot. But the point is, all joking aside, the Rebbe says, take a piece of your home, dedicate it to Torah study and prayer, and you know what? In addition to us being anchored, like we said before, we're now pulling God into the space also. It's now a temple. Take a look. Dan, one more, text 17b, please.
Obviously, just as the synagogue is fixed in the building, so it is with regard to the personal home of every Jew. The Establishing the set place for divine service does not just mean to designate a certain place to pray those prayers and blessings that do not take place with dominion and study Torah, etc. Rather, the main thing is that there be some actual form of building, such as making a bookshelf for Torah books, a table for studying Torah and praying, etc.
The Rebbe ups the ante right there, and he says, don't just designate a space, but make some sort of change, architectural change in the home, in that space, to physically set it as your space to connect with the divine. Your kind of like your portal to another realm, to that worship of God. Your mini. So put up a shelf, a stender. Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, you have a stender, one of these guys. It's fantastic. You can study Torah and stay awake because you're standing up. Hopefully you don't fall asleep standing up. That's a little bit more painful than if you're just not off like that, right? So you have a stender. So you get a piece of furniture or something, or even. Rebbe didn't say this. I'm saying this. He says, what does the Rebbe say? The Rebbe says, make a bookshelf, designate a table, even maybe those bookends, something, to hold your books. So you have shelves, let's say. You designate a spot and you put something to demarcate it, something to physically make the sanctuary in your home. Here's what I love. In conclusion, text 18a and text 18b. I love this. This is going back to the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe writes in one of his letters, this is from the letters, he says, you know what happens when kids see their parents taking their faith seriously, and they see their father or their mother praying in a certain place or studying in a certain place? You know what it does? It just makes everything that much more real and that much more genuine. It brings the theory of Judaism and the concept into beautiful practice, and the impression is priceless. So I'll read text 18a and text 18b. It's just it's so warm. It's so warm. Okay, when a person has set times for Torah study, he not only earns respect at home, for ultimately all Jewish people, God is upon them, may they live, are at their core lovers and supporters of Torah from the bottom of their hearts. Aside from this, the Torah shines in the home. Setting times for Torah study each day. We spoke before about setting a time for Torah study. So imagine if the time that you set at night is when the kids are around. 15 minutes, right? You set time in the evening when the kids are back from school. Right? Setting time for Torah study each day refines a person and refines his home. Automatically, then, his sons and daughters are guided in the ways of the love of Torah and cherishing holiness. And they merit to see children and grandchildren invested in Torah and the mitzvot with fear of heaven. Text 18b. And here he talks about the books. The fact that the Chumash, Talmud, Tanya, the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, are lying on the table in the home. The fact that they are not on the shelf that we built. Right, but rather lying on the table waiting for their owner to come causes the light of the Torah to shine in the house. By the way, this light of Torah is not some metaphysical thing. It means literally. The kids come in and what do they see on the table? Not the New York Times and not People Magazine. What do they see? They see a Tanya, a Shulchan Aruch, a Chumash, right? A Talmud, an art scroll. The Torah light of the businessman. Not talking about the Torah scholar, the yeshiva student. The business person who studies Torah every day is felt in all household matters, such as kashrut and modesty, etc., and specifically with regard to the upbringing of the children. In other words, this is not just something that's good for the person themselves, but it has a far-reaching impact on the entire mishpachah and the entire family. And let's summarize, because we have a lot of... to me, it's very touching, these ideas, but I just want to summarize and bring everything together so that we walk away with some practical resolutions, perhaps. We started off the class by talking about how Avram Avinu, he prays to God once about Sodom, and he prays again the next morning. The Torah specifies that he went back to the same place. The Talmud says, you know why? Because you should always pray in the same place. And we explained that the way it's said in the Code of Jewish Law, there's different opinion, but the way it's said in Jewish law means that when you're at synagogue, you should have a set place, and when you're at home, you should have a set place. And we asked, what's the value of a set place? Who really cares where you pray, as long as you're praying? And we explained that just like it is within time, that when we're setting Torah study time each day, we're supposed to set a designated time each day that doesn't change, because it's not just about studying Torah. It's about making it a priority, which the priority is evoked, is manifest. How do you know it's a priority? When other things revolve around it. So just like it is within time, it's within space. When a person davens in the same place, it means davening is really important. They're not just roaming around. Whatever I find first, no big deal, I'll just pray there. Praying in a certain space means that it's a priority, and everything else revolves around that. This is where I am. It's a fixed place in space and in my soul. So in life, we're meant to have time made holy by having set times to study Torah, and space made holy by having set spaces to worship God through prayer. And then we concluded by saying that to build a sanctuary for God means to take part of our home and designate it a place to pray when we're not in shul, a place to study. And that is not only good for God and good for us, but it transforms the entire atmosphere of the home. The entire home becomes filled with holiness. And it creates a tremendous, tremendous impression and sets a tremendous example for everyone in the family. So practical resolutions. That's my quick summary. Practical resolutions. Number 1, straight up, set a time to study Torah each day. Ideally by day and by night. But you know what? You can even start with 1. Each day. So I love the fact that we've all set 7:30 Wednesdays to study. And that's fantastic. But if you can find each day a moment, doesn't have to be long,